Hey, what's up, Spirit family? We're on the Issa and Allison podcast, and we're here to talk about how to find your inner joy through traveling. So we're going to have Allison get started.
We have so much to talk about with this wonderful series. We're going to start off with the first topic. There are so many life lessons to be learned while traveling. Here are just a few of them that I've learned personally through my experiences of traveling. So we're going to talk about the behaviors and what you learn and things you unlearn while traveling, which is very important to talk about. So when you travel, you learn so much about the world and so much about life in general. So before I traveled, I had a very limited understanding of different cultures. Once I traveled, I not only learned the customs of other cultures, but I found a sense of joy from learning these customs, okay? Which increased my joy once I returned home, and it really improved my life. And there's so many examples that we're going to give to you today about how this process works. So we tend to have a very limited sense of joy in our lives because we stay in one place, right? But there is difference and an expansive impression of joy once you get to travel, right? And this really opens up everything to you. And when I say that it's expansive, it's pretty much never ending. Please let us know in the comments what your experience has been that's ever brought you joy while traveling. So Alex, how about you share a story about something that brought you joy while you traveled?
I think when we talk about customs, a lot of times we focus on the traditional customs, right?
Yes.
What was interesting to me is that when I really traveled, so I traveled to Japan alone. And that was very interesting to me because I want to travel alone because I realized when I brought a friend over, sometimes you have to do things according to what they want to do. You don't get to do as many things with like people around the area. So this is a very new experience to me and I was very excited to do it. Now, in terms of customs, we actually focused on not just traditional customs, but also the modern customs, which is not very talked about within society. A lot of times we only talk about the traditional, but not the actual modern. So within the modern customs, what I learned when I went to a meetup is that there was a meetup in Japan, and the meetups in Japan are like amazing. Okay, so we had meetups here, but I didn't know that actually meetups started here. But for some reason in Japan, the meetups were like at least 40 or 50 people attending. It was really amazing. And it was a meetup for a language meetup. So basically, Japanese people trying to learn English, English people trying to learn Japanese. So I was really excited about that because it's my first time. I wanted to make some Japanese friends. So when I went there right away, I was like, hello, how are you? And I said, hi. And we started talking. And they said, Alex, can I tell you something? And I said, sure. And they're like, can you make sure not to get offended? And I'm like, that sounds like I'm already going to be offended. So I was like,
He's preparing you.
I am cautious now because you told me not to get offended. And I feel like anyone saying don't get offended, they plan on offending that person, right?
That's
so I was
American.
like, you know what? I'm in a new country. Let's do this. Let's make this happen. I'm ready. So the first thing they said was, I have to tell you something. So basically, whenever I meet most Americans, but especially most Californians, such as you, the first thing they ask me is, what do you do for work? How much money do you make? Where did you get your education? Okay, these are three common questions that all Americans, but especially most Californians ask. And that was very interesting to me. So I was like, yeah, aren't those, normal questions you ask around? And they're like, yes, for most Americans, especially for most Californians, but in Japan, especially where we live in Osaka, we have something different. And I was like, well, what do you do that's different? I mean, it seems like that's a regular thing to do. And they said, well, we normally like to ask them, what do you like to do for fun? What their hobbies are? What their passions are? And what kind of books they like to read? It's all very interesting things because, again, I was like, that actually makes sense. That normally comes about 10 to 15 minutes down the road as opposed to the first part of the conversation. So that becomes 10 to 15 minutes down the conversation. So this is very interesting to me because I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna lie. I won't be the first American, the first Californian to say this, but you're right. We actually do that. We actually start off the conversation finding out if you are worthy enough to speak to us. And that's something that I admit to. And they're like, whoa, that's awesome. That's the first time someone, especially American and Californian, has ever said, you're right. And I was like, well, what's their normal response? And the first response they say is, most Americans, most Californians that we meet, and we've met many because we're at a language meetup right now, they automatically get offended. They say, well, how are you supposed to start a conversation? Okay, just because you do things differently doesn't mean that I have to do things differently. What's wrong with you? So it's very aggressive. First of all, number one, very aggressive. But second of all, it's also very defensive for no reason. So once I opened my eyes and said, hey, you know what? I want to take a step back and learn from you. Again, it's not about saying what's right and what's wrong, but saying that I want to enhance my communication skills and I want to learn what are communication skills for Japan. It opened my eyes to things and made me think on a much deeper level, which I am very gracious for. I feel a lot of gratitude towards that because, again, conversation has always been one way. For me, learning how communication goes in Japan has opened my eyes and led me to a much deeper conversation. So that's a modern custom. Again, something that's very few talked about, right? A modern custom that's in Japan that I love. So how do you feel about that?
That's really great because I like how you said that we are not the job, right? Yeah. We are not how much money we make. We actually amount to so much more in our life that we tend to forget that because we think our status is the most important when it comes to the education, how much money I make, right? And I'm glad that you brought that up, that our listeners, really, you are more than just the job. You are more than just how much money you make. You are so much more than that. So another point I want to make, which is great, is when we travel, let's go to point 2, is you become very curious about the world. So we're not very curious when we don't move around a lot. We just kind of accept what's happening around us. We're kind of like, well, this is my life, right? But that's not the point when you travel, and this is why. According to a TED radio show called The Curiosity of Discovery, being in a new territory will probe new ideas to make you curious. What the local customs are, you're going to be, you're going to want to know what the local food is where you're visiting, what their language is, how it's spoken, what religious practices they go into. Being curious creates an interest in understanding the similarities and the differences between your culture and another. I think we need to stop judging and be more curious of others. Really get to know people that you don't know very much about, right? Where they come from, what foods they eat, their belief system. It's all going to benefit humanity, and eventually it's going to benefit you as well. So while we're traveling and living somewhere completely different, we get this new perspective, and it's just different. We don't just hear it, but just like we experience it. And this is something that I want to ask you about, Alex, because I know you have a lot of empathy and you have experienced a lot of great things that have changed you and given you joy. So can you share one with us?
Of course. I mean, I love that you mentioned this because, again, whichever country you live in, we have to burst that bubble. Luckily, not all of us, but a large amount of us have this very egotistical, closed-mind perspective. Like, I feel like we're both unicorns here, like I'm unicorn 1, unicorn 2. To find someone who's open-minded about different cultures is there, but it's rare. So I'm glad that we both have the perspective. Now, in terms of Japan, we talked about modern aspects of the culture. Now let's talk about more traditional aspects of the culture. So when I was in Japan, during that meetup, I actually met my best friend named Hiroki. Now, Hiroki speaks very little English, but it helped me learn how to connect with someone on a much deeper way, not just within language. Again, that's ego talking. I can't relate to you because we don't speak the same language. That's actually wrong. Hiroki's my best friend. He speaks very little English and I speak very little Japanese, but we connect on more than just a language area. We connect on a spiritual level as well as emotional level, okay? He reads my body language. He reads my personality, my attitude, and I do read him as well. And we connect on a level that's much deeper than just the language itself. Also, we have very similar values, which makes him my best friend, okay? So when we went to Nara, it was the first trip together. This guy is too sweet. So basically, also I learned about the whole entire new area of sweetness in Japan, because normally when I travel, I'll ask someone, hey, like I'm gonna travel over there, they should make time for me. And I'm like, yeah, we'll see. I gotta work, I gotta do this, so I'm not sure. Japan, by the way, is renowned for working. They are renowned for being hard workers, which is so funny because going back to the modern perspective too. So the funny thing they told me is that Americans talk about work even after work. And the thing is that Japanese work very hard. We're known as hard workers. But the thing is that once we finish work, we want to stop talking about work.
Yes.
Why are we bringing it home? Right? So the thing is that when you finish work, they're like, we finish work. But when Americans finish work, they still go home and talk about work.
Yeah, we carry it on our shoulders, and it's like in our thoughts and our dreams. Yeah, we have.
Oh yeah. So it's very interesting. The Japanese told me that they're like, it's very interesting that you guys still talk about work even after work, and you guys work less, but you still talk about so much where you work more.
Yes.
So it's an interesting perspective. So you learn a lot about that aspects when you live in different areas, or when you travel to different areas.
Be part of our lives. So I love how you talked about that. Another point that we're going to make is the whole aspect of culture shock that happens when you travel. For those of you who don't know what culture shock is, let me explain. Culture shock is a feeling of being disorientated and experienced by someone who is suddenly subjected to an unfamiliar culture, way of life, or a set of attitudes or beliefs, right? So it's kind of similar when you go somewhere, like with the temple culture. I could see how that could be a big culture shock because we're not used to doing that every day. It's a beautiful, beautiful experience, right? It brings you so much joy, but we don't get the full benefits of it because we have our egos, like you said. So when something's unfamiliar, we think of it as strange, and this is very guilty of our culture, right?
Yes.
And we think that they don't have the same privileges or they're not allowed to be as equal. This is a perfect time for us to open our minds, right? We need to understand and learn from what we're seeing, what we're hearing, so that we get the full benefit. And not only just to benefit us, but you can benefit everyone by sharing what you learn, right? And helping others understand how to communicate better with other people, right? Yes. So this is the time to unlearn what you think is normal, okay? Now this means we sometimes have to forget things that we learn and learn something new. I believe that the whole world is one, okay? We are global. We are responsible for each other. We need to understand each other and stop judging each other. And we need to really just embrace that we are all human, right? And we are all one. And we just need to help each other and show compassion. And so I feel that this type of traveling and what you experience, Alex, is the first step for people to understand how to do that, how to admit that they cannot accept what is different. And this is the best way to open their eyes so that they can have the global awareness that includes someone's lifestyle, someone's opinions, right? Just because I don't believe in the same thing doesn't mean we can't be friends, right? That's very difficult in our culture. If I don't believe in this and you don't believe in that, we think we're enemies, but we're not, right? We need to understand other people's histories, right? Other people have struggles. Other people have triumphs. Other people have a story. We all have a story and we need to listen. So what do you feel about that, Alex?
I feel like it's important to understand that diversity is not our challenge, okay? And I feel like we're programmed. This is what we have to unlearn, because we're programmed to think that diversity is our challenge, when it shouldn't be, okay? And we are all human, we are all one, but we're not treated like that. We treat other people as if they're lower than us. That's our ego talking. When we feel like we're above someone, we are no longer human anymore. We're experiencing only ego, only selfishness, which is not a human trait. Human traits are humanity, are compassion, empathy. All these aspects make us more human, not thinking we are above other people. And also acknowledging the struggles of different cultures is so important to our well-being, okay? Even though we are all one, we're not all treated like one. And that's the mistake we have in our society right now. Now, when I went to Japan, you're totally right, it is a problem. Being in Japan, it helped me understand that, you know, these aspects, learning about communication, modern communication, learning about cultural customs, to learn how to burst through my bubble and embrace these differences, helped my life so much. And we need to, doing a synopsis of all these things, we need to acknowledge that. Okay, because if we're focused on our way is the best way, how do we grow? Because we are only a part of the world.
Yes.
The world is not
Small
made
part.
up of only Americans, right? It's made
Very
of
small part.
Americans, Africans, Latinos, Chinese, Middle
Yes.
Eastern. We have all these different cultures, and every aspect of those cultures is beautiful. We all have our strengths, we all have our challenges. But when we choose to say ours is best or we can't learn from others, we choose to limit ourselves, okay? And that's the unlearning process. Do we want our ego and our aspect of saying, hey, we are better than, to be a reason for our lack of listening, for our lack of growth? We don't want that. So it's important for us to say, hey, I'm gonna push down my ego and say, I am a student to your culture. When you go to Japan, when you go to Thailand, when you go to other countries, you are not there for them to be your guests. You are their guests, okay? So you have to acknowledge that and learn their customs, because you are not in your country anymore. That's what I learned when in Japan too, especially. I came in there, I'm not like, hey, you need to speak English. I'm like, they're saying, how can I learn the correct terminology? How can I learn from you your customs? Because I am in your country.
No,
So I learned how to say konnichiwa. It's funny, the Japanese don't expect a lot from you, but they want you to learn just the common term. Just like if someone came to America, you don't need to speak English fluently, but just learn the common terms like thank you, goodbye, hello, how are you, is adequate. It's nice enough. Same thing with Japan or Thailand, saying konnichiwa, watashi wa Alex. Especially one word I used a lot, which they're very polite in Japan, was sumimasen. Because when we go around, we're not just pushing people out of the way, like, hey, get out of here. We're like, oh, sumimasen, so you can get out of your way, so you can move forward, because it's very crowded over there. So all this terminology is not only essential, but also respectful when you're in someone else's country. So letting go of that ego and embracing being a guest and letting them actually teach you as opposed to you only teaching them.
No, it's totally true. When I went to Japan, I love the concept, and I wish I knew it in Japanese. Someone please help me what it is in the comments. Where I don't want to cause suffering in the person in front of me, or I don't want to cause suffering in the person in back of me, right? And this is something the entire culture practices, right? This is in their mental, mindset. This is in their customs. This is in their everyday movements. And that's why it's such a polite country. Coaches, we're giving you tools to better your life and to give you joy. So what would you like to share with them?
I would like to share the fact that traveling is something that can really change your life for the positive, but you also have to realize that you have to push your ego aside when you travel. You have to be a student, be a guest and learn from them, as opposed to feel like you are above them or you know more than them. You have to go to another country and learn their customs, learn their culture, and learn their techniques in order to really grow and fully experience that culture, which most people don't do. I meet so many people every day that travel around the world, and they say, oh yeah, it was okay, I didn't really learn that much. And I'm like, if you went to anywhere, including your own country, and you feel like you didn't learn that much, then you have truly kept yourself from learning, because we have so much to learn every day. Even when I walk down the street in this country, when I go to my neighbors, when I go to the people that own the liquor store down the way, which I don't buy liquor there, but I'll buy like grapefruit juice or something like that, okay? And I learned so much from their lives. We don't have to travel to learn and grow, but traveling helps us to understand that the world is so much bigger than where we live. And it's important that you can save up. You don't have to do the most expensive things. You don't have to stay in like the most lavish hotel, or you don't have to stay at the most lavish area, right, to enjoy traveling. You can save up. You can stay in a hostel. You can go to different areas that are free. There's a lot of free areas in Japan, in Korea, in Thailand that still have such cultural significance and that are gorgeous and beautiful, especially Japan. They are, by the way, they are super clean over there. They don't make anyone feel dirty, okay? They're so clean over there. But there's things you can do that are either little to no cost. So don't feel like you have to have $5,000, $6,000 saved up to travel. You can just go there on a expense to still experience each culture. Because again, people's true worth, there's no price tag on that, right? It is priceless. Knowing Allison, the host of today, is priceless. I love her. I enjoy her company, and I don't have to pay her to talk to me, okay? And vice versa. And if you have a true friend, again, a true relationship is more than just finances. In fact, finances are either little to none, okay?
Yeah, it's true. No, and sometimes when you experience travel as a local, you actually really immerse yourself in the culture.
Yes.
So it's a good point that you make. You don't have to be rich. I've traveled to 13 countries, right? And I'm an educator. That was my job. Of course, I don't make mountains of money, but I was able to experience another life. I felt like I was in another life, right? So that's because of the choices I made when I traveled, right? I chose to travel with the locals. I had chickens next to me while I was in Thailand, right? This guy brought a chicken and he just stuck it between my legs and I just held it there, right? He's in a cage, and you have to experience the culture.
And the last thing I'll say about that is that kindness, you learn about kindness in different areas when you go to different countries, okay? Kindness comes in different levels when you go to different countries. And once you think kindness is one level in America, when you go to Japan, when you go to Korea, you start discovering this whole entire new level of kindness that you never thought was possible, and it's beautiful. When I went to Japan, the level of kindness I experienced actually changed my life so much for the better, because it was so beautiful, so intriguing, so valuable. So if you want to experience kindness in those beautiful different levels, please travel, save up. You don't have to do a lot, but save up what you can, and you can experience all those things. So thank you guys so much for being part of this podcast. Allison, you did a great job hosting. Awesome. Please make sure to like, follow, as well as make sure to go to our Patreon and support us on there, because we're new podcasters and we need your support and we need your love.